In this video, I will show you how to write nonconformities and how to not do it. As you can imagine, this is a very important skill to be good at for any auditor. One person who attended my ISO 13485 internal auditor course even said, "I wish someone had shown me how simple this could be 30 years ago." Now, I'm Peter Sebelius, the author of the internal auditor course on medicaldevicehq.com. If you are in the medical device industry, I'll be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. Now, how should you determine and document if the audit evidence is conforming to the audit criteria or not? Let me start by bringing up what you should not do. Well, firstly, you should not be subjective. And secondly, you should not jump to conclusions. In all the auditor training courses that I do and deliver, I find that initially the students are so eager to find nonconformities that they see them everywhere, even though there is formally no audit evidence that proves that it's a nonconformity. And this can happen also to experienced auditors. Don't do this mistake. As an auditor, you should not have opinions about how the auditee is running its company. You are not there to guess or assume that they are doing certain things or not. Remember, always maintain objectivity. And if you do not have objective evidence that the auditee is not conforming to the audit criteria, you should not write a nonconformity. Now, this last point is very important. When writing a nonconformity, it's your job as an auditor to collect sufficient audit evidence to determine if the auditee is conforming or not. One way to ensure you are not becoming subjective is to use a special way of writing the nonconformities. So let me start there. So here's the trick. When you find audit evidence that does not meet an audit criterion, you just copy the audit criterion, or the requirement in ISO 13485 in this case. Then you remove any irrelevant text and just negate the sentence, which is done by adding various forms of has not or not to it. Then you have a description of the nonconformity. Let's take a few examples. We'll start with 5.2 in ISO 13485 as an example. The requirement is that top management shall ensure that customer requirements and applicable regulatory requirements are determined and met. During the audit, you learn that the auditee is developing a software that will process personal data for EU customers. The management representative confirms that they have not considered the General Data Protection Regulation, or short GDPR, that does apply in this case, which means that the applicable regulatory requirements have not been determined. Now, when you write the nonconformity, use the requirement text. Now, I've copied it down to the track changes row. I remove the unnecessary text and negate the sentence. So I remove the section number, I replace the shall with has not, and add a D in ensure. The next edits are really important. So far, the only information we have is that the auditee has not considered the GDPR. So we need to remove everything else in the requirement to focus on the determining applicable regulatory requirements. Therefore, I remove customer requirements. What about ensuring GDPR requirements have been met then? Well, actually, we don't have any evidence that they did not meet GDPR requirements. I agree, it's of course unlikely that they do if they haven't determined that it applies, but the auditee might, for example, have implemented more rigorous data protection procedures that would meet or exceed GDPR requirements without them having determined that GDPR apply. Thus, the only thing we know about this nonconformity, and the only thing we can keep in the description of the nonconformity, is that the auditee has not ensured that the applicable regulatory requirements have been determined. This goes back to not jumping to conclusions. The final description of the nonconformity is only that the top management has not ensured that applicable regulatory requirements are determined. It's not more than that, it's not less. Here's another example based on 5.3 that is also about management responsibility. Please note that section 5.3 contains several letter items A to E, but I'm jumping directly to D. In this case, you ask a few people in the organization what the quality policy means to them, and they said that they don't understand it. When you show the quality policy to them, staff member C say that this is only applicable to the quality department. Can't you hear that on the title, quality policy? So we can safely conclude that the quality policy is not understood within the organization. Again, I will remove the section number, negate the sentence by replacing shall with has not, and then remove communicated and. Because keep in mind, at this time, we don't know if management communicates the quality policy or not. They might be working really hard on the communication, but the staff still doesn't get it. So again, don't jump to conclusions. So in this case, I will just leave the understanding part in the nonconformity. This results in this nonconformity: top management has not ensured that the quality policy is understood within the organization. What if you learned that management never communicates the quality policy? Well, then you can add or leave the communicated part in the nonconformity when you write it up. Now, the important thing is to not expand the nonconformity to comprise more aspects than you have evidence for. Remember, just because the staff doesn't understand, it doesn't mean management didn't communicate it. So keep it to the point. Next example is from 425 and relates to records. They shall remain legible, readily identifiable, and retrievable. During the audit, you notice that the thermally printed cleaning record from the dishwasher equipment 002 from 4th of May 2019 has faded, and that the last 3 rows cannot be read. As always, we start with the requirement, remove the section number, and add the have not and remove the irrelevant words. This leaves us with a very short nonconformity, which is that records have not remained legible. It's as simple as that. Next up is a special case. I will start with the audit evidence this time. The Quality Manual version 3.0 states that all members of staff must wash their hands before entering the canteen. When attending lunch during the audit in the canteen, John Smith, from the auditee, was observed not washing his hands before entering. Now, if you read ISO 13485, there aren't any requirements relating to washing hands before entering the canteen. If it had been a requirement relating to entering production or a clean room, for example, you could say that there would be applicable requirements, but in this case, it's a requirement that the auditee has taken upon themselves to meet while it's not required by ISO 13485. The first question is if this really is a nonconformity, and I would say that it is. The auditee states that certain things must be done in the quality manual, and John Smith didn't wash his hands. As there is no specific clause for this situation, the clause to use is 413, which says that for each quality management system process, the organization shall, and I've omitted A and B and gone directly to C, implement actions necessary to achieve planned results and maintain the effectiveness of these processes. When the organization is not conforming to its own procedures, but there is no specific requirement in the standard, this would be the relevant audit criterion because the organization has not implemented the actions necessary to achieve planned results. If they had, John Smith would have washed his hands before entering the canteen. Using the same methodology as before, we get the following nonconformity. The organization has not implemented actions necessary to achieve planned results. Now, sticking to this way of writing the description of the nonconformity is key to getting this right. And anytime you don't follow this way of working or writing, you risk having the auditee arguing with you about the requirement not being what you wrote in the nonconformity. So save yourself a lot of time by sticking to this way of writing conformities that will support you getting them right and objective. If you want more examples like the ones in this video and hands-on training on how to practically conduct an audit and not just high-level principles, check out the auditing courses that are offered on medicaladvicehq.com. And by the way, there are more videos relating to auditing from Medical Advice HQ here on YouTube, so check them out.